Well, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandy Griffin, and this is Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark. Today, she is joined by Ricky Kriete, and the topic of conversation is working with attachment disorders, the spectrum from fragility to resistance. So I will hand it over to Diana, and we will definitely leave time at the end for any questions that you may have. Diana.
Thank you, Brandy. Ricky, welcome. I'm really happy to have you. As I was telling you in the pre-show conversation, people toss around words like attachment disorder with a knowing nod. And I might be another one of those people who nod back, but the truth is I don't really know what I'm nodding about. So as somebody who treats and specializes and looks at this from all kinds of angles, how do we usually see or hear that word attachment disorder manifest? When do we hear that come in?
Well,
And welcome.
yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And in terms of attachment, I think the first thing is that we need to sort of define and know what it is, right? And not, pathologize it in any way. We're born with a natural imperative to attach to people. It just means connecting, it means intimacy, it means closeness. But then what happens is, you go through life and you're looking to attach, you're looking to be authentic. And then people won't accept that in one way or another through development, right? One of people that I follow, Gabor Mate, he says, when an infant has the choice between authenticity and attachment, they'll always choose attachment, right? So we grow up in environments with households with parents that have trauma themselves and trauma before that and trauma before that. And so the infant basically says, well, how much of me do I have to get rid of in order to be acceptable to you? And we all have this. This is a normal human experience.
Right.
But right. So it's like, it's not even about, who has it, who has it. It's not a disorder per se. It's just an adaptation, right? We were taught implicitly in our attachments to ignore parts of ourselves or, use certain strategies in relationship to stay safe. And then I was really adaptive when we were growing up. But then if they persist, then they start getting transferred over to other relationships later in life, and they don't really work out, right? This is why people walk into our office.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you. I want to go back to an introduction. What brought you into working with what some of us would characterize as complicated, difficult, often dramatic? What led you particularly? And then we'll go back to talking more about the theory, but I want to know what brought you to working in this realm?
Uh, I wish it was a little bit more exciting than this, but a lot of it was just very serendipitous. I actually ended up having my first job out of grad school at a public clinic at a hospital, and one person sat in front of me and was very complex, complicated trauma history, and then another person sat in front of me, and another person sat in front of me, and this was a free, public clinic, right? I would work with, survivors of very, very severe abuse. And so it was like a sort of like a sink or swim situation. And so I was like, well, I need to start finding the people that know and that can teach me how to sit with another person that has had an enormous amount of pain in the context of an interpersonal relationship, and how do I help them, right? Because that's the first and foremost. Like, a lot of these people have been discarded as untreatable. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like,
Yes.
oh, you can't help this person because they have XYZ, code or diagnosis, or you can't help this other person because they have these symptoms. And that's not true, right? That's not true. We can help people. We just need to find the right person. And and I always believe that there is a person that can help another person. It's just about finding the right one, and have that person have the right training too.
Right. I love your optimism. I do. that everybody is treatable. Sometimes I wonder when we think about treatable, and I 100% agree with you. I don't believe in discarding any diagnosis and say we can't treat it. I do believe that treating it may sometimes simply be stabilizing if possible. True?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what does it mean to be treated, and at what point of treatment is what appropriate, right? Because, for instance, if you're talking about a person that has very severe emotion dysregulation, right, that their bodies and their minds, when they have a feeling, they completely dysregulate. The anxiety goes above threshold. They start to get blurry. They can't think straight. They dissociate and this kind of thing. For a person like that, an experience of healing might mean organizing that experience, helping them cognize and say, hey, but you notice we're here, you and me, and we're talking about your mom and how she was really mean to you. And as you and I are sitting here, you sitting there, and I'm sitting here, all of a sudden this anxiety started to go way, way high. You started getting blurry in your eyes, and then you started getting a little woozy. Did you notice that? Right? Did you notice that we're talking about your mom and then this started happening? So just creating that link for them and helping that person observe. And then we might get curious. Okay, so should we team up and see, well, why is that, right? Why is it that as you and I are sitting here, your mom's not even here, right? This happened like 40 years ago. Why is it that it's happening now? And then you invite a curiosity and a team, and then you can start figuring it out, right? But that's an organizing experience for someone like that is very powerful, because no one's ever helped them figure something out. No one's ever helped them notice a link between talking about something and getting anxious in their bodies, right? So this may be a regulating thing, but it's also a very powerful interpersonal experience.
And what we know about that, and I know enough just to be dangerous, Ricky, is that when two people really connect in that way that's authentic, that actually calms down that flight, fight, freeze response and makes it a therapeutic moment, right? It's the connection.
It's a moment of intimacy.
Yeah. That didn't wind up being harmful.
Right, because, if we think about in terms of, a classic corrective emotional experience, right? If a person dysregulates in that way, it's safe to assume that they never had anybody to help them regulate, right? Their parents either weren't able to regulate themselves, and so it was never modeled. You can think of it as more of like a deficit, right? So our jobs as therapists is to start modeling that, and then start helping them notice and empower them to notice. And this, has the neurons firing, and then they can start to create new pathways and create, new ways of being, and that are, restructured. You could put it that way. You could restructure the way that the brain is operating, and then, help them have feelings at a little bit of a higher level without getting anxious, and then feelings at a little bit of a higher level without getting anxious. And pretty soon you're in a treatment where a person's not dissociating anymore, not going above threshold. They can just actually have the experience of their emotions and attach at the same time, which is what wasn't able to happen before.
That is amazing. So we're doing a little bit of exposure therapy in terms of intimacy exposure therapy. Is that?
Absolutely. 100% absolutely, right? For someone that's on the fragile side of the spectrum, we want to expose their mind, their body to affect with an A, and have them experience that feeling until we see them, like just move over threshold. And then we can sort of recap, talk about it, and say, hey, so you felt this at this level, and it seems like your anxiety just got a little bit higher than it's useful for you. So can we just pause, you and me, and just notice again that we were feeling this at this level and this happened. And so you build like a new bar, and then you go again, and then you go again. And so each time the body starts to build an affective capacity to bear feelings at a higher and a higher level. And so they won't have to depend on anxiety. They won't have to depend on strategies that are self-destructive or self-defeating, like, substance abuse, or, self-attack, or self-injury, or suicidal ideation, or self-judgment, or whatever kind of strategy they were taught to use to ignore or avoid parts of themselves in the service of making themselves acceptable to their caregivers.
Wow. So one of the things I loved about what you just said is that anxiety, the way you approached it was the anxiety stopped being useful. Because I think we hear that word, I'm anxious or I have anxiety, and think it's never useful, but it's got to be useful sometimes, right?
It's the most useful thing ever, right? And in the way that I practice psychotherapy, there's been thousands of clinical hours of tape reviewed on this, where anxiety can take sort of like one of three pathways in the body. So the first pathway that it could take is sort of like sighing respirations, like in the voluntary muscles. Like you'll see this all the time, where someone sits in front of you, they go, right, they take a sigh, or they're like tense in their neck. And so this is like a voluntary pathway. So we want to have anxiety in our muscles. They keep us upright, they keep us straight, like we're strong, right? But then all of a sudden someone walks into your office and they get nauseous and they kind of collapse in like this, and they're like, they have IBS and all these things, and you're like, whoa, where did the anxiety go? And the answer to that is it went into the involuntary muscles, into the organs, into the lungs, into the stomach. And so that would be more of like a repressive sort of like inward thing, right? Like, and it's tough, right? Because if you see someone walk into your office and they're just like kind of slumped down and low energy like that, no one would think to say, hey, do you notice yourself feeling anxious right now? Because that doesn't look like anxiety, or at least the mental representation people have to mean anxiety, right? But then they're over threshold, their anxiety is too high. So, this is a gift, because if all of a sudden I'm talking to someone and they're tense, which means that they're like good to go, let's, have some feelings, let's, connect. And then the next second they're like this, I'm like, did you notice what just happened? A moment ago, you were tense and solid in your body. And then now you seem to have gone a bit collapsed. What happened? Right? And then we can invite a curiosity about that. And then they could start to go out in their life and say, I started having anger towards like the clerk in the store because they gave me poor change. But then I noticed myself feeling tired and like kind of nauseous. So then they can say, so when I feel angry, I get anxious and then I sort of collapse in on me. Why? Right? Why does that happen? And so, we can invite that curiosity and say, okay, so there's something about feeling anger towards people that feels dangerous to you. And so something in your mind, without you noticing, out of your awareness, shoots it into your stomach, right? It's not like people wake up and they're like, at like 2:43 p.m. today, I'm gonna like get anxious and get nauseous. They don't do it on purpose. So our job is to say, hey, so, can we, give our clients the gift of body awareness, give our clients the gift of awareness in general, because consciousness is hard, and invite them to notice experience that, previously has needed to be excluded or, denied or neglected.
Great. Yeah. So talk to me about imagine for a minute, some of our listeners might be family members of those who are struggling with the reactive forms of attachment problems.
Mhm.
Some may be just family members who have a curiosity about this.
Mhm.
We talk about traumatic moments, young and during sort of formative. Can we normalize that a little bit so that people don't feel like, oh my God, I caused this, I created this? Is some of this temperament? Is some of this inborn? Tell me a little bit about the nature nurture parts of it.
Totally. I mean, there's 100% a very important component of this, that's nature. Everybody has a temperament, everybody has a biology. and even a genetic biology, right? There's studies lately on epigenetics and how epigenetics get modified and, you know, transferred over genetically to, you know, children and grandchildren and all that. That's really the part that we can't control, right? But there's a massive part that we can control, which is, you know, the nurture portion of it. And that's where we really get to work, you know. And if I were to, you know, give one piece of advice to all of the people that are out there with family members struggling is, you know, to allow for people's experience. You know, people have been neglected, or parts of their experience have been neglected in 1,000 ways, but particularly like more, you know, I don't want to put a hierarchy, but like harder feelings to accept, like anger or painful feelings and stuff like that. And so, you know, most people conflate things like anger, and they'll say, yeah, anger's bad. And they'll usually be meaning, you know, I'll ask clients, well, what do you mean it's bad? And they'll say, well, you know, I hit this guy in the face and then I went to jail. And I was like, well, would that be, you know, feeling anger, or would that be like doing violence? And then they get to say, yeah, of course, doing violence sucks, right? Like it's not helpful. It's not helpful to people. It's not helpful to you. But feeling anger is an important thing for us to be able to set boundaries, for us to be able to embody power in ourselves. And so we can help people start to differentiate that and to have their mixed feelings, right? People don't struggle with one feeling per se. People struggle feeling anger at a person they also love, and they struggle feeling love at a person that they're also angry at. The people don't have a conflict when there's just one feeling. You know, we've all seen the person that's always angry or always loving. Like that's not complicated. But unfortunately and fortunately, we're complicated people. So it's about complex feelings and mixed feelings. It's really not about a single feeling. You know?
And what have you noticed during humans being complicated, living in small, confined spaces in ways they hadn't before? Are you noticing that people are getting more dysregulated?
Oh my God, yes.
Yes. Tell
Yeah.
me about that. What are you seeing?
I mean, you know, the thing is, so put it this way, right? If I'm a therapist and I'm sitting in my office and I have a first session with a client, and they come in to the session, they've never met me in my life, and immediately when they sit down, they get super anxious and they start, you know, doing all these things. And so then you wonder, well, why did that happen, right? What, they've never met Ricky Kriete. They've never even sat in front of me. But why is it that they come and, you know, and it's because they're saying, can I depend, right? Can I attach with you? I'm coming for help, right? That's what the message is. I'm coming for help. And then unconsciously, their entire repertoire of relational experiences gets activated. And they start to attribute things to you that don't belong to you, right? You know, I expect that when I go to connect, someone will fill in the blank, right? So to answer your question in a roundabout way, sort of, imagine now you're having to attach, you're having to relate with the same person probably more than you used to before, more time, all the time, and no one else, less people.
Relentless time.
Less time. So it's like saying the attachment system will wake up, right? Whatever a person's attachment blueprint, repertoire, the way they feel, the way they don't feel, the way they relate, you know, effectively or not effectively, it will all get heightened higher and higher and higher. And so it's just, you know, that's just how it is, right? The more we attach, the more we connect, you know, the more we feel if we're on the healthier side, or the more we don't feel if we're on the unhealthier side. And that really is what is going to make or break it in these times, right? Is, are you able to withstand like the emotional impact of the other person, and vice versa, and talk about it and share it, rather than not, right? Disconnect and disavow it, and get through it, right? But it's tough times for all of us, and in program.
Absolutely. So when I texted a friend of mine, I said, I've had a very productive morning. I've exercised, I've taken my course, I've meditated, and I've squabbled with my husband, which counts for connecting. I'm not alone.
Oh no, I squabble with my partner all the time. All the time.
And does it count as connecting? That's what I want to know.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, what could be possibly more vulnerable than openly expressing your anger towards someone and having that person receive it? This is a intimate experience.
Yes.
Very, right? And the same with sadness, and same with joy, and same with everything. Any sort of experience that someone is, you know, feeling towards you, it's a very intimate moment, and then that's where the trauma happens. Will I tolerate, accept, acknowledge, validate, receive my partner's mixed feelings, my friend's mixed feelings, my girlfriend's mixed feelings, or am I gonna somehow invalidate, disavow, block, right? And that's where the trauma is, right? The trauma is not about feeling, it's about how people respond to you feeling towards them.
So in that scenario, I'm going to make it, I meet somebody or I've expressed anger. Part of me gets very frightened by that because that is what humans do. If we have been disavowed, our feelings have been disavowed. So you get scared. And then depending on your style, you may climb back in to yourself, right? Or you might actually express it, which is more authentic.
Right, right. You may just say, yeah, I feel angry at you because, you know, this, and the other. And then if you put words to feelings, you don't have to put behaviors to feelings, which is great, right? Because, no, you know, putting words to feelings never hurt anyone, but putting them into action definitely hurt people, right? When people yell, when people hit someone, when people punch the wall, that kind of stuff hurts. Like, it'll hurt your fist, it'll hurt the other person, it could get you into trouble. So I often tell my clients, yeah, we live in the land of words. So if you ever feel like you can't put your feelings into words, and we, you know, may need some extra help, right, for like people that are suicidal or that kind of stuff. If we can't put your feelings into word and you're finding yourself needing to put them into action, we need to get some help here, right? Because this is all we have, words, right? Words and descriptions, and this is our goal to bring awareness and to put words to feelings, to put words to experience, to put meaning on experience, and to be able to share that in the context of a relationship.
That's so beautifully said. So beautifully said. Thank you. I'm really glad we're recording this, Ricky, because I want to listen to that again. It was really powerful, and
I'll probably have to listen to it because I don't know half the stuff.
Right.
I
totally get that. Yes. So I would like to open up to questions at this point and see what we've got. Join us in this conversation, folks.
The Q&A function should be available if anyone in the audience has any questions.
Don't be shy. There are no dumb questions, as every teacher.
No, there really aren't.
Yeah.
When we think there's a dumb question, it's like actually really interesting.
I guess I have one part. Oh, you go ahead, Diane.
My question is, what's been the most difficult case for you and why?
You know, it's actually kind of weird because yeah, I think every clinician has people that they struggle with more, people that they struggle with less. I actually feel very comfortable with you know, trauma and very severe, like, you know, personality disorders or dissociative disorders and that kind of stuff. More for me is like the people that are, you know, very locked down, like detached and very much defending, not like you know, when we defend, we can either, like, you know, block feelings out or we could block people out, right? And I struggle with the people that do this, right? Because it's like, listen, man,
you're like climbing over the top, right?
Listen, I'm trying to reach you over here, but you're putting up all these walls, and that's like a struggle. So I've actually, like, sort of learned to channel my own kind of frustration to help with that rather than be destructive, right? Because there's good reason why they're behind the wall,
right?
But those are the tough ones for me.
Right. I had always found that it was the people. I worked in a middle school. I've worked in a bunch of varieties of settings. And so I have seen ranges of from not ill at all, really well, and bored. So they would walk into my office in school, and the really unwell.
Right.
And I found that the snarkier, the more defended, and this is in middle school, the kid who wasn't worried about people pleasing me was my favorite. It
Totally.
was the good kids that I had the problem with. That was me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear you. It's like there's like an honesty to it, right?
Yes.
We have a question from the audience. Can you
Okay.
comment a little more about the authenticity and attachment dynamic you mentioned earlier? How do we make decisions between these two? When does it become clear that one provides a better path than the other?
Can you read that again?
Can you please comment a little bit more about the authenticity and attachment dynamic you mentioned earlier? How do we make decisions between these two? And when does it become clear that one provides a better path than the other?
Oh, I think I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
I do.
When
Go.
we when I said what Gabor Mate says, that when an infant has to choose between being authentic and attaching, they will always choose attaching. And it makes sense, right? Because attaching means food, attaching means like, getting breastfed, attaching means like a roof, attaching means survival. So that will always be the choice. That this is not like a sometimes thing. For an infant, it's developmentally appropriate to attach. Survival will always come first before authenticity if it's placed under threat, right? So the choice there it's not a complicated one. When it becomes complicated is, when that system of choice gets kind of put out of awareness. And so then you're like 30 something and you're like, I can't hold a relationship because I don't know why, right? That's why they come to you. They're like, I don't know why. So then it's like, oh, can we start to help these people notice what they had to exclude then that they don't have to exclude now, how they do that, why they do that, and then have them experience it. So then they have that capacity, that corrective experience of, oh, I can feel my anger, I can feel my love, I can feel my pain, and I don't have to detach, I don't have to lash out, I don't have to do all these things that before was very adaptive, but now is really getting me into trouble. So the exercise of helping a person build that awareness and build the awareness of that choice, I think is a central component in psychotherapy, right? Because people don't do it on purpose.
Right. Right. Thank you.
That goes
Yeah.
into the question that I wanted to ask earlier, which was people, I'm sure, go through this sort of attachment, disattachment. I don't want to call it a game, but these different phases at different points in their lives or different phases in your life, whether it's like starting college and moving away from your family, and then you're looking for friends, or starting a new job and you don't know how you're going to be accepted there. Can you talk about sort of that adaptation in different environments, and how that looks when people are changing what's the norm, I guess?
Totally. I hope I can answer your question. I really do. But I think that how I want to answer this is something that is fascinating to me because, for example, if a person has, ways of relating that are on, for example, the, you know, domination and, kind of more compliance dynamic, right? For example, then that person that has a very dominant character structure that doesn't really feel things because they're very dominant, they go to work and they work for like a cutthroat, CEO of a business, and they do fantastic there. But ask that same person how it goes when they shift over to the home and they try to be dominant with their partner. It doesn't work, right? So what is adaptive in one environment at one point in time, like at work, you start to understand, oh, why this is sort of like unconsciously why this person chose this job. it fits perfectly with how they defend and how they don't relate, right? And then but it doesn't work in all spheres. It doesn't work at all times. It doesn't work at, with different types of relationships. So this is when it becomes problematic, right? When the way of relating becomes rigid, and you have the person that relates in the same way everywhere, right? They could be sitting in front of the Pope or the Dalai Lama, and they're still defending. And so you're like, well, why? Right? And then that's our task, is to help them develop more flexibility, more choice, so they can flow through these environments being authentic with them, within them and between people.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? We have one last question from the audience, if that's okay. Diana, you're on mute.
It's great.
Okay. So the last question, Ricky, is, can you heal or fix a relationship that has transformed and is now based more on attachment rather than genuine love?
So you can heal any relationship with the right help. I think perhaps what this person means, and I could be wrong, by attachment means like some sort of like codependent, sort of not healthy, like a toxic sort of relating, right? If that's the case, yeah, totally. You can, each person can get their own individual therapist that's effective and practices, really nice forms of psychotherapy that have been proven to work really well. And then as each of them starts to relate to themselves better, it'll bring it into the relationship, right? One of my favorite things is when I hear my clients saying, my partner's getting healthier as I relate to them after doing my work with you, right? So it's such a gift, because we get to, it's like a tree, right? It expands, and it's not just the person that's sitting in front of me, it's their entire family that's going to have a totally different experience of them. And then it trickles over, and that's really cool to know. So yeah, yes, to answer your question, you can help yourself, and you can heal a relationship. You just have to give it a go, and it's not easy. None of this is easy, right? None of this is easy. It requires an enormous amount of bravery and courage, and I think every therapist should have that front and center of their minds. Like, walking into a therapist's office and doing this really deep transformational work is very vulnerable and very brave and very hard. If your therapy is not hard, fire your therapist. It should be something difficult.
Good point. I want to close on that. I love that line.
Sorry, that's a vicious line though.
But it is hard work.
It is.
It reminds me as a therapist, I don't just get to say the easy things and the support the things and the bravos. My job is to challenge.
Right. That's where growth is.
Yeah.
As they say, the view is always best on the edge. Let's close on that.
I like that better. Thank you, everybody, for coming to Collegial Conversations. Thank you, Brandy, for moderating this, and really big thank you to Ricky.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the
great conversation.